Hey everyone, I'm talking about the zoo this month. I'm really excited about it. And I had started writing this song in January of 2017. I had a chorus, just that first line. My mind is skipping like a stone over silent waters. Each time I try to pull you close, I seem to push you farther. And Tori and I actually decided to do a little getaway where we went and stayed in a log cabin in January of 2017, and it was really cold outside with this wood-burning stove inside, and we basically just sat in there and we played music for a couple days, and that's the weekend we ended up writing the zoo. And it wasn't long, 2-3 weeks before Tori's first show on the bass, so she was also learning the GMB music then, so we had played a lot of music, and we actually finished writing Eastbound that weekend as well. So the thing about the zoo is it's a song about anxiety and how it manifests itself in my life. So I'm feeling a little nervous about talking about it today, but I think it's going to be a really interesting one, and I hope you enjoy it. I wanted to do a few different things in the zoo when I started writing it. The first thing I wanted to do was actually write a progressive song, a song in a progressive form. I wanted to show different viewpoints and ways of looking at this issue in my life, and I wanted to put it to an upbeat tempo. And the reason I wanted to encase it in kind of an upbeat, fun song is just, or at a glance, it's kind of a fun song when you don't dig into it, is because anxiety manifests itself in my life as energy. It's very energetic, it's not slow, it's not, looks very different than when I'm down or dealing with depression or that kind of thing. So I wanted to write an energetic song around this thing that is externally looks very energetic in my life when I'm struggling with it. So let's talk about the form, the progressive format first. So I grew up listening to a ton of metalcore music, hardcore music, stuff like that. And almost all of that type of music is written in a progressive format. And so what that means is, instead of writing a song that is verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, chorus, which is how, a lot of Good Morning Bedlam songs and a lot of mainstream music is written, it's written as a section A, section B, section C, section D, and maybe at some point it might go back to section A, but overall it moves to a new section. It's a great storytelling format and a great tool in that way, but I think it's maybe one of the reasons you don't see it a lot in mainstream music is because you don't have that hook, you don't have that piece of the song that somebody can circle back to and sing along, because normally in a song you hear the chorus and you're like, oh, that was really catchy, and then it comes around again, you're like, ooh, I recognize it, and now I get it, I can remember it, and then by the third time you can sing along, and that's kind of the goal of doing that. And since you can't do that, it's harder to write a catchier song oftentimes in a song that just keeps progressing into new sections. We've got a section A, a section B, a section C, and then we repeat part of section A to end the song. So section A is, how is what's going on on the inside affecting and looking like on the outside? And then section B is what is actually going on the inside, and section C is how is that affecting my relationship. And then it kind of ends going back to section A to kind of show the cyclical nature of how anxiety can be in someone's life, and specifically in my life. It kind of circles back to section A to almost show that it's starting over and how it goes around and around and around. So you get through this whole thing of being able to name what's going on, and then at the end it's like, oh, the song's starting over, the cycle's starting over, and so that's kind of why I do that. But let's take a little look at the lyrics, how about? My mind is skipping like a stone over silent waters. Each time I try to pull you close, I seem to push you farther. The reason I wrote that was just to show that this anxiety is it's not a situational thing. It's something that is coming from inside, and I think that in different situations where you're struggling with something, it's something you need to understand about yourself. And so I am the stone, and I'm skipping across, or my anxiety is skipping across calm water. So the calm water is just to show that it's not that I'm being tossed by a storm, it's that I'm doing the movement and everything around me is calm. I'm still having anxiety. Each time I try to pull you close, I seem to push you farther. And in these situations, I end up doing the exact opposite of what I want to be doing. I push away when what I'm really trying to do is become closer, and specifically to Tori. Screaming, can you hear me? But no sound escapes my mouth. And this is just kind of about how sometimes you think you're doing one thing, but you're not. Sometimes in these situations, I'll say, we'll be talking, I'll say, well, I said I needed help, or like, I was telling you how I was feeling. Couldn't you tell that I was struggling? Or it was pretty obvious. I thought I was being clear. She'll say something like, you didn't say any of that. And Tori's a pretty intuitive person about other people and their feelings and how they're doing. So if she's not picking up on it, then you probably weren't very clear. Sometimes I just kind of imagine it's like you're standing there with someone and you're saying, help, help, help. And then later you're like, why were you ignoring me? And they were like, you weren't saying anything that whole time. And I think sometimes that's how this issue kind of, shows itself in my life, is that I think I'm being clear and I'm not. I'm usually saying the exact opposite of what I think I'm saying. Screaming, can you hear me? But no sound escapes my mouth. Four walls are made of glass, I can't escape, but I can look through. Too slow to realize I'm not the human, I'm the zoo. So unlike depression or things like that in my life, those things make me feel very alone and isolated. And the thing about anxiety is that it doesn't in my life. It's usually a comparison game. It becomes a comparison of me to those around me. And looking around and saying, yeah, we're the same. We're on the same level. We're doing the same things. And the thing about having a see-through cage is that you don't feel like you're in a cage, you don't feel isolated because you can see everybody else and they can see you and you're all in the same space. It reminds me of, like, at the zoo and there's a gorilla enclosure, and I sometimes imagine, like, the gorillas are looking at us and they're thinking, oh, those poor people that are stuck behind that glass, they're trapped. What if they don't even realize that they're in the enclosure? And I sometimes feel like I do that. And so that's what that part is kind of about. Alright, so now we're moving on to section B of the song. This part is what is going on inside. Come on, come on, and you'll find at the back of my mind. And that come one, come all is, I feel like, kind of this invitation into this. It reminds me of like almost like a mad circus. And that come one, come all. I don't know, like a house of horrors or something. And so we're gonna get really dramatic and pretty into just what goes into the mind, and what's going on in the head during these situations. Because it's so different, it looks so different than on the outside or in my relationships, what's going on inside my head. That's why we changed the time signature, we changed the tempo, because even though it's in the same movie, it's in the same genre, it's a totally new scene, a new scenery, so we really wanted to show the different viewpoints of this thing. So let's take a look at the crazy circus insanity inside my mind. How about? I always imagine in this part, actually, when we're doing it, of like you're watching somebody and it zooms into their mind, and there's like an Osmosis Jones scene going on in the brain of what's happening. All in you'll find at the back of my mind, there's a voice saying, son, if they love you, they're blind. We'll stay if you stay in your cage and let nobody through. You'll never feel pain, you'll have no one to lose. And so this is about just the voice inside your head, and I think we all have this, that tells you don't deserve love. And that's something I struggle with a lot. That's the voice in my head that says it's better to stay in your cage. If you don't trust people, then you can't be betrayed. If you don't let people love you, then you don't run the risk of doing something that will make those people stop loving you. You can't be abandoned if you don't let yourself be loved. Which is not a very healthy way of thinking, but that's not the kind of thinking we're talking about right now. That's how it kind of looks in my head. And we'll live out each day in our box of perfection. perfection. The numbness will keep you from feeling rejection. The voice in your head that tells you things that are untrue, or I hope somebody else has that voice in their head, it'll often twist things. I was calling it a cage, and now the voice in my head is speaking in the song, and it's calling it a box of perfection, which sounds way better. This is just basically saying the world is messy, and stay in your box and stay in your perfect little space here that you can control. And that's a terrible way to live. Just why we try not to listen sometimes to the voice in our head. My biggest fear in my life is definitely the fear of rejection and of abandonment. It's something I struggle with a lot. And so this idea is, if you can numb yourself enough to feel like you don't need love, then you could reject other people before they reject you. And when I'm at my worst, that's kind of how I function. When I'm at my best, that's when I can reject that idea and that lie that I tell myself. And that's a way worse way to live than to love and be hurt, is the lesson I learn over and over and over again. Because ultimately, it doesn't really save you from being hurt. Oh, I am all that there is. I am the cut, and I am the kiss. Alright, so I'm going to do a little story here about where this line came from. I'm all that there is, I am the cut, I am the kiss. And that's the voice in my head speaking. That same January when we started writing this song, Tori had started a theater company with our best friends. They were performing their first play that they had written together. They're called the Orchard Theater Collective, and they're great. They're still going, even though Tori's not actively involved because she's on the road all the time. They had written this play, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the play because this is where I stole this idea from, or borrowed, because I loved it so much. In the play, it's kind of a meta play, but there's a woman in the play. She gets separated from the love of her life. Right after she gets separated, she meets this person, and they become friends, and you get to kind of see their friendship develop. You start to realize that he's actually not her friend. He's, as I interpreted, the voice inside her head that tells her lies. And so you kind of realize, like, oh, he's not a friend. But of course she doesn't realize it in the play, and she treats him like an old friend, which is exactly what I do in my own head too. I treat that voice like it's a friend. Whenever her lover comes on stage, the love of her life comes on stage and is looking for her, her friend distracts her and, says that nobody's looking for her, or the love of her life really left her all alone and abandoned her. And then eventually gets to the point where he says, love in your life is just a dream. It's always just been you and I. We're the only people that really exist. And they play this awful game where they would face each other, her and her friend, and they would take turns hitting each other in the face softly, and then harder and harder and harder and harder until one of them actually got her. And they would laugh as if they were playing a game until one of them actually got hurt. And of course it was always her, because she was thinking this game's no big deal, and her friend, the voice inside her head, is actually trying to hurt her. And it's a representation of what we do to ourselves. We would never do to somebody else what we do to ourselves in our own head. We would never talk to people the way we talk to ourselves in our own head, and that's kind of what it shows. So basically when she ends up collapsing, from this game and crying, he runs over and he comforts her, and she's basically says something to the effect of, I'm so glad you're here to comfort me. And of course us as an audience member are like, whoa, that's messed up. He's the reason you need to be comforted. He was the one who hurt you in the first place. And I think that's a really interesting look at abusive relationships, and specifically in this song, the way we abuse ourselves, mentally. And that's what I Am the Cut, I Am the Kiss is about. Really the voice in my head saying, you don't deserve to be loved. And also saying, that's why it's just you and me, I'm the only one on your team. It's like having a doctor that cuts you open when you're not looking so that he can stitch you up and be like, wow, such a good thing I was here to save you. And you're like, wait, what happened? I guess so. We're the ones who do the wounding, and then we bandage it and say oh, look how good we are at bandaging. Alright, we are in section 3 now. So this moves out of what's going on in the head and into what this looks like in a relationship. So section 3 changes tempo in time signature again. It's light, it's frantic, you know, it's got this I think of it almost like this like circusy little thing, and I realized it really reminds me of the La La Land soundtrack. Darling girl, I swear it's true, I try to keep my vows to you. Selflessness has never been my virtue. When Tori and I got married, you know, that was, you know, that's the vows you make when you commit to each other is I'm going to put your needs first, and I'm going to put our needs together as a team and as a unit, and as people who are I'm always going to be on your side. And on our side, I'm going to put that first. And that's a real struggle for me. Selflessness is something that I really have to work on. You paid your dues, we've had our laughs. If you said that you'd take it back, I swear I'd never think to blame you. And if you decide you've chosen wrong and that we should have done this, I wouldn't really blame you. You know, that line is, anxiety leads to this kind of victimization of like, oh, I'm just so horrible I couldn't change. And having to own up to that. The scars across my side don't show it's love I want, it's pride I know. The more I learn, the less I seem to grow. And that line's just a little bit about a brief period in my high school years where I struggled some with some self-harm. Oftentimes in my life, arrogance gets in the way of me asking for help or admitting my mistakes. And just because I can put a name to what I'm dealing with doesn't make it easier to change or doesn't help me change all the time. Tori comes in, and I love this line when she sings it because she doesn't say, like, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna do this, like, you should just try being healthier and getting fresh air. Like, she just, like, all she comes in and says is, oh, I see you. Which is such an empathetic response, and which is why I love her. She just says, I see you. I understand you. I love you. And then I come back. Can't seem to say it, but I hope you know I need you. La da 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 da. When you come back home, you know I'll greet you, Tori says. When you come back home, I'm going to be here. I'm here to love you. I'm here to be here for you. When you come back home, when you put down your armor, I'm here to love you unconditionally. And then this last line is the vow we've made to each other together. I hope you know I'll always reach you. And just about how we vowed that no matter what happens, we're going to keep fighting to reach each other and to know each other and to love each other unconditionally and to support each other, whether that's tough love or just encouragement. All right, so here we are in section A. It slows, it calms. We're back to the calm waters. And the goal is to kind of show you like, oh, it's resolving. Okay, it's over. My mind is skipping like a stone over silent waters. Each time I try to pull you close, I seem to push you farther. Screaming, can you hear me? But no sound escapes my mouth. What we do in this song is actually repeat the first line of the song to show that it's cyclical, and sometimes there's just not a good answer. The reason we do this is because this song is not about the cure to anxiety, and it's not about, oh, well, if you just find somebody you love, then you won't struggle anymore, and the fact is, you will. It's about a glimpse into my life, because it's a struggle for me. I think that's what's really different about the Light Kings album overall than Prodigal. Prodigal is really about, like, I was struggling and then you like came into my life, or I was struggling and then I came home to my family, or I was struggling and like now I'm doing better. And Light Kings is more like, what do you do now? What do you do when you find out there is not a cure? There's just, life is really, really beautiful, but it's also really tough. And that's what the zoo's about. I just really want to be honest about like one of these struggles that I have in my life and how it's okay to struggle. It really is okay to struggle because life is hard, but it's really beautiful. And I think those struggles make it more beautiful. I hope I didn't get too preachy on you there, but thanks so much for listening to the Behind the Bedlam about the zoo and the writing and the lyrics and how the song fits together and the themes and the words. I really hope you enjoy this, and I hope you, if you have questions, you leave them below. All right. See you next month.